Right now, somewhere on Earth, a war is happening. There has not been a single day in your lifetime when that sentence was false. You probably assume this is a failure of politics or a failure of leadership or one unlucky century of human history. The real answer is far stranger, and it begins in a graveyard beside the Nile that is 13,000 years old. In 1964, an American archaeologist named Fred Wendorf dug a small cemetery in northern Sudan on land about to vanish under the Aswan Dam. It was cataloged quickly and given a number instead of a name. Site 117. Today you know it as Jebel Sahaba. Wendorf recovered around 60 people. Nearly half had stone points inside their bodies, points lodged between vertebrae, points driven into skulls, men, women, children. For decades, this was read as one catastrophe, one terrible morning. Then in 2021, a team led by the French anthropologist Isabelle Crevecoeur re-examined every bone under high-powered microscopes. What they found was worse. Many injuries had healed. Others had not. The same people had been wounded, had survived, and had been wounded again not one battle. A rhythm. Raiding repeated across years by people with no cities, no states, no armies, and no writing. In 2016, the paleoanthropologist Marta Mirazon-Lar published a discovery from Nataruk on the western edge of Lake Turkana in Kenya. 27 people, roughly 10,000 years old, crushed skulls, obsidian blades still in bone. One woman lay in a position suggesting her hands had been bound. These were hunter-gatherers. No farming, no property, no border, no flag, nothing you have been told causes war. Moved to central Germany, to a village site called Talheim, uncovered in 1983. 7,000 years old, 34 people thrown into a pit, most struck from behind with the stone adzes their own culture used to clear forest. Their tools became their weapons in one afternoon. Then there is the most famous body in European archaeology. In 1991, two hikers in the Ötztal Alps found a corpse in melting ice more than 5,000 years old. He is called Otzi. For years he was imagined as a wanderer who froze. Then a radiologist noticed a shape in his left shoulder, a flint arrowhead. He had been shot from behind and left to bleed. On his hand was a deep defensive cut on his gear. Later analysis found the blood of 4 other people. He was not a victim of the mountain. In 1996, the archaeologist Lawrence Keeley gathered evidence like this from every continent and argued something that unsettled his own field. The peaceful prehistory taught in schools was not a discovery. It was an assumption. Fortifications had been called enclosures. Weapon. Caches had been called tool collections. Mass. Graves had been called unusual burials. The evidence was always there. The interpretation had been protecting people from it. If war is not a product of civilization, of nations of religion, of ideology, or of technology, then what exactly is it a product of? To answer that, you have to leave the human species entirely. In 1974, in Gombe Stream National Park in Tanzania, Jane Goodall was watching a chimpanzee community she had studied for over a decade. It had recently split. The northern group became Kasakela. The southern group became Kahama. They had once groomed each other. They had once shared food. Then the northern males began to travel south in silence. What Goodall documented over the next 4 years was so disturbing, she later wrote she had struggled to accept it. The males of Kasakela moved along their border in tight, quiet groups. They stopped vocalizing. They listened. When they found a lone member of Kahama, they attacked in numbers and did not stop at driving him off. Every male of Kahama was killed. The territory was absorbed. The primatologist Richard Wrangham later named the pattern the imbalance of power hypothesis. The rule is simple and cold. Attack only when the odds are overwhelming. Never fight fair. Wait until 3 of you find one of them. This is not rage. Rage is loud and short and stupid. This is patient, coordinated low risk, repeated. Wrangham drew a line between reactive aggression, the hot explosion of losing your temper, and proactive aggression, which is planned and strategic. Humans are unusually low in the first, extraordinarily high in the second. And here is the part that reframes everything you thought you understood. Proactive group violence is not the opposite of cooperation. It is cooperation aimed outward. Think about what a raid requires. Several individuals must agree on a target. They must move together and stay silent. Each must trust the others, will not run when it begins. It takes shared risk, delayed reward, and the willingness to bleed for someone who is not your child and not your sibling. Every one of those abilities is also what allows a hospital to be built. Wrangham called this the goodness paradox. On the individual scale, you are remarkably calm. On the group scale, you are the most lethally organized species that has ever existed. The same trait measured from two directions. The evolutionary psychologists John Tooby and Leda Cosmides described this as a kind of contract. A group attacks only when each participant calculates that the benefit outweighs their risk of death and believes the others ran the same calculation. That demands enormous mental machinery. You must track who is loyal. You must detect who is a coward and who is a cheat. You must remember what someone did to you 2 summers ago. Your brain is a coalition tracking machine. It was not built to make you good. It was built to make you reliable to your side. That machinery does not switch off when the war ends. It runs in you right now, waiting for a boundary to appear. In the early 1970s, a psychologist in Bristol named Henri Tajfel tried to find the minimum conditions needed to make one group of humans discriminate against another. He expected it would take history. Grievance insult. He showed schoolboys who did not know each other screens covered in dots, then told them at random they were either overestimators or underestimators. In another version, he told them they preferred the paintings of Klee or of Kandinsky. The categories were meaningless. The boys never met the other group. There was nothing to compete over. Then he asked each boy to distribute money between an anonymous member of his own group and an anonymous member of the other. They favored their own side immediately, and they did something stranger. Offered a large reward for their group, while the other group also gained a lot, or a smaller reward, while the other group gained far less. Many chose the second. They took less for themselves in order to be ahead. The margin mattered more than the money. The human mind does not need a reason to split the world. It only needs a line. 2 decades earlier, in the summer of 1954, Muzaffer Sharif brought 22 11-year-old boys to a camp at Robbers Cave in Oklahoma. None knew each other. He split them into 2 groups before either was aware the other existed. They named themselves the Rattlers and the Eagles. They made flags. Within days of learning about each other, they were raiding cabins, burning the other group's flag, and stockpiling rocks. Boys who had been strangers a week earlier now called the other side sneaky and cowardly. Sharif had not engineered a conflict. He created 2 groups and let the machinery do the rest. The neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky studies what this looks like inside the skull. Show a person a face categorized as belonging to another group, and the amygdala responds in roughly a 20th of a second, faster than conscious recognition. Before you have finished perceiving a human being, some part of you has already sorted them. But Sapolsky also found the escape hatch, and it is the most hopeful fact in this entire story. The categories are not fixed. Change the boundary and the brain resorts instantly. Give 2 rival groups a shared task, and the same amygdala that flared a second ago goes quiet. Sharif proved it. He ended his own war by breaking the camp's water supply and stranding a truck in the mud, so the Rattlers and the Eagles had to pull the same rope to survive. Within days, they were sharing meals and asking to ride home on one bus. Your brain does not love your group. Your brain loves having a group. So if the line can move that easily, why is there always, without exception, a war somewhere? The answer is not that humans are always aggressive. The answer is that the threshold is not symmetrical. Peace requires agreement from everyone. War requires only one. Around 2,400 years ago, an Athenian general named Thucydides sat down to explain why his city had destroyed itself in a long war with Sparta. He identified 3 drivers that push groups toward violence regardless of intention: fear, honor, interest. The first one is the trap. In 1950, the political scientist John Hertz gave that trap a name: the security dilemma. You are afraid, so you build a wall and arm your guards. From the outside, a defensive wall and an offensive staging ground look identical. Your neighbor cannot read your intentions, only your capabilities, so your neighbor arms in response. Now you see their weapons and your fear is confirmed. 2 groups who both sincerely want peace can walk straight into war, each one convinced they were only protecting themselves. Now hold that mechanism in mind and add scale. There are roughly 200 sovereign states on this planet, and inside them, thousands of factions and rival claims. Each runs the same ancient calculation. Most of them, most of the time, choose restraint. The rate of violent death per person is lower today than in almost any period we can measure archaeologically. And yet the number of active conflicts on Earth never reaches zero. Because with enough rolls of the same dice, some will always come up war. Not because humanity is broken, because the number of players is enormous, and the threshold for one of them is low. Now come back from the Nile, from Gombe, from Oklahoma, and look at the room you are sitting in. You have felt this machinery today. You almost certainly did not notice it. You felt it when someone criticized a team you support, and something in your chest tightened before you had formed a thought. You felt it when you read a comment from a stranger and instantly sorted them into a category. You felt it in the small satisfaction of watching a rival group get something wrong. Notice how fast it happens? It arrives before your opinion does. You are not choosing a side. You are discovering that you already chose one. Notice also how little it takes. Taj Fell needed dots on a screen. Your version needs a jersey color, an accent, a single sentence from a stranger. The line does not need to be meaningful, only visible. That warmth you feel when you belong to something is not separate from the thing that emptied a village in Germany 7,000 years ago. It is the same circuit. Belonging and exclusion are two ends of one wire. You cannot have the first without powering the second, which means the question was never how to remove it. You cannot. It is load-bearing. It is the reason you would run into traffic for someone you have known for 6 months. The question is, what you draw the line around Tajfells, boys needed only a coin flip to become enemies, which means they needed only a coin flip to become allies. The boundary is the one variable in this system that is not written into your biology. It is chosen every day, mostly without anyone noticing they are choosing. Right now, somewhere on Earth, a war is happening. It is not evidence that something in humanity is broken. It is evidence of how completely you were built to belong, and how casually that same wiring decides who stands outside the circle. The line is still moving. It has never once stopped, and a small part of it runs through you.